Hello and welcome back to Factorio. This week's video is going to be very short. All we're going to be talking about is just how to create the save files for Purple Science. So if you're not submitting a design, then you don't have to watch this video. But if you're just curious in what goes into creating a save file, come along for the ride anyway. So in front of you here is a base save file that I'm going to be sending to every single person who participates in the competition. What this is going to be is you're going to have access to a couple things in this save file. You're going to have a little book like this, and it has a couple different things in here. You have access to the template that I've used that I'm going to be using as the baseline, so you can kind of compare performance if you want to yourself on your own. But the main thing is I just created this. This is exactly like my Q2 build. So for those who have stuck around with the channel for a little bit, you have already seen a version that of Production Science that I wound up creating, which looks like this. Very similar, but you can see there's a massive difference, which is you don't need the amount of steel. So just to make it simple, I just said this is my baseline build, exactly the same as the original Purple Science that I had done for Q2, but now just using Q1 and changing everything to, instead of having raw ore that pipes across, it's just basically now molten fluids. So not too much thought went into optimizing this, so that's why I'm just considering this the baseline. So every single save file, what is it going to ask for? You need to make 960 per second of Purple Science. What am I going to be testing once I open it up? I'm going to ask that you create a save file like this and you don't clone it yet. So the reason being because this is going to allow me to do some tests. So mainly the tests I'm going to do are the following. I'm going to go and test this. I'm going to basically stop production, basically run the game until it completely stops like this. And then I will resume production again, and I'll have the F5 menu set up so I can debug, and I'm going to look for gaps. So if there's gaps still constantly showing up after 5 minutes, then the design is disqualified. The second thing that I'm going to be looking for is if you lose inputs. So for example, for some reason, you run out of stone completely. Like this is basically going to be the test. So if you have a direct insertion mining set up, I'll delete well, at that point, it doesn't really matter. So stone is not going to be as big of a deal. I'm going to be doing this basically for each of the resources that you have belted in if you are doing it. And just checking that on the output here, this is still constant and there are no gaps on the belt. Same kind of thing if you run out of molten copper for a moment. Basically, this is basically the test that I do. Let everything run out, undo it, and watch what the output is then here. So same thing then now with copper. So do that, test that, basically wait until everything runs dry like this, and then undo it again and see this. So if there's a case where there's gaps like this on the belt and you occasionally have these stutters, I don't care. That's fine with me. What I would normally do anyway is I can just let this all back up again. And if the save file can effectively then just recover after that point, I'm fine with it, because that basically, if you were in a real base, what you would normally see is you'd have you could switch research. So you could switch something from mining productivity to go over laser weapon damage, and that would also just stop all the belts and back everything up. So there's ways around it, so that's why I'm not too concerned about it, as long as there's a way to fully recover whenever you lose an input. So what are the inputs? So for this, every single one of these designs, if you're making 240 per second, you should really only need 5 lanes of stone if you're going to be using that. If you're belting in stone, that's all you're really going to need. Otherwise, you should be able to, hopefully, by limiting it to just the 4 belts of output that you need to create, you should be able to fit all the fluids nicely in here without running into fluid pipe constraints. But if you do, you can mess around with creating a couple of these other extra kind of auxiliary direct insertion mining setups. For the fluid buses, I'll touch quickly on it. If you use water or basically, we're also going to be using crude oil here. I'm not going to be using miners this time. It's such a tiny difference, and they're a lot more complicated to ask people to set up. So we're just going to use infinity pipes for these. That's fine. So we're going to be using pretty much for everything in the save file. You don't need very many mods. The only one that you're going to need is Region Cloner. It's nice just to have it already preloaded in the save file, even if you're not cloning anything. But the moment you open up the template, you already have it if you just sync the mods with the save. Ask that you don't add any other extra mods, except for maybe editor extensions. That's the only other one that I'd be okay with. I just don't want to have to go and prune and clean them up when we go and save them and run them. So other than that, so for crude oil or for water, if you decide to use both of those, just basically use a infinity pipe that's just over here, and you can go into the editor and you can go and grab this infinity pipe. You'll already, by default, when you open up the map, you'll already be in the editor view, but if you for some reason get out of it, you can type /editor like this, and that will get you into the editor view. The editor view is going to be very useful and being able to go and actually create the save file, because you will need it to basically copy all your entities and those kinds of things. So really, now that I've kind of like explained, this is the overall kind of like template of like a save file that I'm looking for. So just to reiterate, 960 per second on the output, and basically just provide a way for all the just mountains of stone that you're going to need, and then the fluid itself if you're using this. So for this competition specifically, there's a couple criteria that I'll explain once we actually create the save file here in a second, but the first things that I want to talk about are just what do you have access to in this blueprint book. So this is going to be in the save files. You don't have to download anything else. I have a couple just like quality of life things. So this is basically how you can automatically just remove anything from a belt and feed it into an infinity basically output. I'm asking that you use this and not the editor extensions version. That way we have a consistent version that we're using across all the save files. So for those outputs, that's going to be this here. Just basically copy that. You can basically take that blueprint that I have here. You can just stick it on wherever the output is of your build, you know, like this, and then just attach it, and you're good to go. So that's all I'm asking, just use this. And then additionally, if you're going to be using molten fluids, really realistically for creating 960 per second of output with full productivity and everything that you have access to in the save file, you should really only need to consume 2.2 million per minute of molten iron. So for that reason, like basically I've included a couple templates. I ask that you don't change these out if you're going to be producing them. Please just use these so that we don't have any more like variance between all the different versions, because this could be potentially optimized. That's not the point of what we're testing. I want to be testing what's on the right hand side here, but still having the cost of these running. So what do I mean by this? So for example, if you're going to be slapping down and you want some iron input, you can basically go and place these down. And then you can go and you could say, okay, let's grab basically the molten iron that I'm going to use. And these are tileable, so you can just place them like this. So that's all I'm going to ask. And then once you actually load your the calcite that comes across, you're going to use just basically, you can use this and copy this from the template. Please just use this, and as you really should not need more than one lane of the calcite. And then this should be enough. Each one of these can make 760 or 750 per second. I've tested this already, so each one, like two of these would be 1.5 million. So I'm keeping this also as a simple number, because as you continue to go up with like the actual fluid consumption that you're going to need, these should be an easy number of 750, 1.5, and then 4 of these would be 3 million. So you have enough to basically create the ones you want. Same exact thing for copper. You should really only need one of them, because you're going to need very little actual copper for this unless you're doing some other kind of shenanigans. So you're up to you on creating that, but that is basically the premise. I don't care about patch sizes for copper or for iron. That's something that you're going to need a very tiny amount, so that's not a worry for me. What is more of a concern for me is stone. So let's dive into stone. So specifically what I want to talk through is, and I'll showcase this. Let's switch over to VS Code so that I can explain the documentation that I have for this. So there's a written version of this that'll be in the video description below. You could read this and this will explain all the different guides, but the biggest call out that I have immediately that is on here is the guidelines on patch sizes by map gen settings. So what I wound up doing is I literally mined this data by creating 4 different worlds, and wound up just basically expanding a coverage of 5,000 radius in all different directions from the center of the map. And then I wound up harvesting by placing miners across all the individual like patches themselves by just basically templating it, as you're seeing it right now on the screen of how I was doing that. And then I cataloged that, put them all into one gigantic blueprint book, and then I created a script that would calculate basically the X and Y deltas across basically each of the patches from one miner to one miner. So I just used that by extracting the blueprints from all of them. And then I computed, and there's a Google Sheet of all the data that I have. But in the end, I computed basically like a circular radius around about the average patch size based on each of the spawns, because I needed this in order so that we can have like a realistic comparison of what it's going to look like once you actually get into a real actual save file. So for that reason, just to make this really simple, here is like the average patch size in square tiles, assuming a circular radius. So that's basically what these are for like a square circle. So at 100%, The nice thing is that this works out pretty nicely for a circular brush size. So if, for example, let's say our world, I want to be targeting a 100%, this will work on default settings, then I'm going to go and choose the brush size of 18. So, and then like for me personally, I'm not going to penalize, for example, anyone if they use a 100%, 200% and up, 400% and up, 600% and up. It doesn't matter to me. I'm just going to use it in the end because then we could just basically take the best design at 100%, the best design at 600%, etc. And then people can choose based on my public blueprint book, like which ones they want to use for their own base. Because not everyone's going to want to play at the same save settings, save file settings. For me personally, I don't care. I run everything at 600% for mega basing. I don't think there's any penalty to that. Like that's 100% okay with me in my book. And so that's how I'm going to be doing things. The design that I'm going to create is going to be targeting 600%. I'm not caring at all about the other settings. Now, if your design doesn't fit on a patch like this, so if you are, if you're over the 600% mark, then you're going to be considered an editor only build. So and in that case, I'll just caution you that I won't include it in my blueprint book because no one is going to necessarily use it. I'll have it available as like a caveat, but I won't include it in like the ones that I would commonly like encourage people to use because not too many people are as interested in just a pure editor world. But some people play that way and I don't want to discriminate against that. So for sure, if you want to submit a design like that, you might get a more optimal version. So why is this whole thing important to me and why did I do this data mining test? So let's go back over to Factorio and I will explain that. So over here, based on that, what we saw, right, the default patch size is going to be 18 for a world that is at 100% spawn setting. And you can kind of verify this, and I have a blueprint book that's also in here so that you can see it yourself. So when you're going and creating this, you can slap this down, you can see kind of this area. And if you look at the ore patch sizes, and you can just grab this book here and hold shift, you can cycle through them. You'll see that I have an average size, and you can see how it kind of conveniently fits over this patch. You can see there's like an outlier that was a little bit bigger. You can see another outlier that was bigger. And then as you go up in patch sizes, so if you go up to 200%, for example, you'll see there's a couple like more lucky spawns where you have like a double patch like this. So those I've included just so that you can see like, okay, you might get a really lucky gigantic patch at 200%, but it's really two patches that happen to spawn right next to each other. So you'll see that like it kind of linearly goes up. So this would be 200%, and then we go over to 400%, and then we can go up to, let's see, let me grab the average for 600%. And so also that's how the brush sizes were determined. This wasn't by looking at it, it's just doing the math of like figuring out what the radius is. So we go to basically now 200%, that's going to be 24. You can see how that kind of nicely fits in there. You go up to the next size, that'd be 32. You can see how that also kind of nicely fits over the whole patch. And then once you get up here, I think technically this should be 38 because that is what you would actually, that would actually make sense pattern wise of how these expansions are going up linearly, but just the way the math worked out, it wound up being 37. So I'm just going to limit that for safety at 600%. You can see how that also kind of just fits over there nicely. So that's what I'm going to say. Just like know that your base is it has to be able to, however you're making your design, it has to be able to fit over one of these giant patches. So if you have default settings, for example, and you're belting everything like I have in this design up here, it's pretty simple. Just to make it really convenient for you, you can just have basically slap this down. You select 18. This default slider goes up to 8,000. So just chuck a couple more zeros in there, and then that'll make a nice, like thick patch that will never run out for the duration of the benchmark. So I'll delete all this. Let me go and clean all this up. So this is the way. So what you can do is you can already just basically use this design and just go directly off of this if you want to. Or alternatively, just to make things convenient, I have a couple different alternative ways that you can go and set up the mining. So if you want this, and I'll make these nice since the name's a little bit nicer, but you'll have access to this one. So this one's really convenient because you can place this right over a 100% default patch size, and you can just go ahead and place it down, and it will create 20 lanes, basically the 20 lanes immediately of all the stone that you're going to need, and that's exactly enough to basically feed all 4 that I'm asking you to create. If you do another strategy, like basically I'm just asking you can create as many of these patches as you want, as long as it's realistic, like how the actual routing of these belts or the train distance that it's going to bring it. Just make sure that they're modular enough, and then reconnect everything with either belts or via trains or however you want to do logistics of routing them, but keep them separate. Don't do, basically what I don't want is I do not want this. I don't want you abusing it by just placing a whole bunch of patches over top of each other like this, because that's not going to happen in the real world. And then that is something that I'm going to be checking for when I look at the actual save file. So don't do that. So that's what you can do if you want the actual stone. Real simple. And the whole reason this has come about is because I am 100% expecting there to be a lot of designs that are going to look a lot like this. A lot of direct insertion going from electric mining drills directly into a rail assembler, just because of the sheer amount of stone that you're going to need. So to completely save having to always pick it up from a belt, I'm fully expecting a lot of these kind of DI builds that are going to be injecting it directly into these rail assemblers. So for that reason, you can see like the limitation of being at 100%, 200%, 600%, etc. is going to severely limit the amount of the way that you design it. And I want to have this constraint because I want people to have to work around the reality of what the game is going to spawn for you. Like going and creating a patch size, right, that is just omega large like this, right, for example, like having this a huge patch. This is cool, but this is only going to work in an editor. So you're never going to see this in an actual game. And I find zero value in like actually going and testing a design like this. And so this works in an editor only world. So that's great. If that's how you want to play, I have nothing against that. But I have no interest in it. So it's something that I will still accept for benchmarking purposes from like a theoretical standpoint, but it'll be in its own category. So that's how I'm going to do this. So in the form submission, you're going to have to actually submit and say, hey, what size did my particular patch work with for stone? And since I'm going to be asking for that means that you do have to pay attention to this portion of it a lot. So just making sure that however you're grading your mining setup and how you're getting your stone, you have to just specify, which basically the map spawn settings for the size constraint that you would have to set in order to make this work in a real world. So that's it. That's everything that I have on the stone, the requirements that are there. So at this point, that's effectively all I'm going to ask is just to create this type of a save file. So now that I've explained kind of the constraints, what I'm looking for, some of the tests that are there, let's go ahead and go into, I'll show how to go and create this file from scratch, and then you can kind of follow along with that, and then we'll end the video for today. Okay, so you will download the save file, you put it under your saves somewhere under Factorio, and then you're going to go here, you will load it up, and then once you have it loaded up, you're going to see exactly what you have in front of here. So the easiest thing that I would say just to start off with is you can either reuse the belts and everything that I have here already routed across everything if you want to use it if you're doing this way. If not though, I'm going to start this completely from scratch just to explain everything that I'm going to be doing with this. So if you want to delete the ore patches, what you can do is you can set this to whatever size you want. You can just basically right click and remove the ore that is in this area that you don't no longer need. And we'll do the same thing with coal. So we'll set this down because I know that I'm going to be at default patch settings. So I'm going to set that up. So then now that I have basically a completely empty world, there's nothing in it, what I will do is I will go in here, I'm going to go grab my design. So in my case, I'm using the baseline design, but you use whatever design you have in your particular version that you have. So for me, I'm going to go ahead and place down all the designs. You should know this because you designed the actual design yourself, so you know exactly how you want to have everything routed. Okay, cool. So the first thing that you can do just to make everything really easy is you can go ahead and add power to the world. So that's going to be this electric energy interface. So just place this down somewhere where you have power. Doesn't matter. This can be literally anywhere in the world, and this will give power to everything because we have global electric network turned on. You just need power somewhere. So for this, I'm just going to place it just somewhere within the build, somewhere like this. Cool. All right, we have power. All right, great. So now this is in a good spot. I've got now my save file, and now I'm ready to start hooking up materials. So I'm going to start with the really easy ones. So this is a reason I like to basically go and always place labels everywhere so I know where I'm going to be putting things. So I know for me, I'm going to want to route up here. I'm going to do some production for the iron itself, the molten iron that we're going to have. And then just for basically connecting here for the crude oil, that's gonna be really simple. All I'm gonna do is just go grab an infinity pipe, and then I'm gonna basically go and set this to be crude oil, and then I'm gonna say, at least 100%. So then this is completely full. We're done with that. If you have water, then go ahead and add that just this exact same way. Now, what I'm gonna do is now I'm gonna go ahead and add what I'm gonna need for copper here. So the really easy way, and this is exactly how I'm going to ask you to do this, is you go and grab a molten iron build like this. So basically what I would do is I would slap down, I'd grab here the iron ore, just grab the square, make this like 10 or so, and then just basically just arbitrarily just place this down, kind of something like this. You can put this in any orientation that you want to, but then what I would ask is you always use this. This is not something that we need to optimize. So basically just go ahead and go and place this down like this. So I'm going to do 3 copies because I know that's all I'm going to need. And this is really all you should need for this. You should not need more copies than that. That should be plenty. And then we're going to go ahead and put that in here. I like to add tanks because you're not always going to have constant production. Like you might have more spiky designs. So go ahead and just add like a couple tanks, however many you think is worthwhile. There's not going to be a huge penalty for adding more tanks. So just add enough that you think is okay. Cool. So we're done with that. Next thing is I'm going to want to have some copper production. So I'm just going to route this really simply all the way through here. And then I'm going to also go ahead and place some copper, and we're going to do the same thing, just arbitrarily just place some down here. And then go into benchmark modules, go grab the molten copper and go and place that down. So I know that I'm going to do this. So I'm going to kind of try to align this kind of nicely so that I'm going to have basically the output here so I can share beacons. The more beacons you can share, that's also kind of beneficial for you. Just make sure you disconnect this. So cool, we've got this working. I'm going to go ahead and plug this in. I'll grab a couple of these. And then finally, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add basically the actual calcite. So for this, all we're going to do for this is very simply, we're going to grab an infinity chest. We're going to place this here. We're going to go and select calcite as the resource that we're going to be using. We'll just put, this amount. So there's always an infinity here. So we do that and just grab a legendary stack inserter, place that there. That's all you should need for this entirety of this build. And you'll see like automatically everything should kick on. You should start seeing already your design kind of like half start springing to life. So this is in a good spot. We're slowly basically building everything out. We're letting everything start up, and we're gonna we are now done at this point with the iron and the copper that we're going to need. If you want to be, if you like having things clean, go ahead and feel free to go and clean this all up so that you only have just the bare amount of resources that you need. I usually do this just mainly because I like having everything nice and clean, but you do not need to do this. This does not impact anything whatsoever, and you can just do this. But I like this because then it's just clean. I don't have to see a whole bunch of ore. So done with that. So now the big item that I'm going to need to do is stone. So I know for a fact with my particular design that I'll probably do stone somewhere up here, just so that way when I clone this, that the amount of surface area is just kind of confined to here. I could put stone down here, but then it's just going to be a larger cloning region that I'm going to need, because when I use region cloner for this, basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a selection of this, and I'm going to copy this design. You're not going to do this. I'm going to do this. So we're going to create a copy of this, and it's going to go to the north. So sometimes with cloning, things get a little weird. So I just want to make sure that I have that all exactly correct for each of the builds. That's why I'm doing that. But I'm going to clone this enough times until the baseline is at a UPS constraint that is putting actual taxing on my particular PC. So for that reason, I just want everyone just to basically just be confined to creating this template here. So ideally, placing your patches and everything in a area that is all within basically like at the minimum horizontal distance or vertical distance. Just know that I'm basically going to copy this to the north. So that will help a little bit with the game file size, just to keep them relatively smaller. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to belt the coal that I'm going to need, and that's really simple. You can just basically place 2 of these next to each other back to back, and just this. You should only need 1 lane of coal for the entirety of this build. So you should not need more, but basically is what I'm saying. So if you're going to do this and you're going to route it to each individual build, use a priority output like this. This is better for UPS, and everyone should be doing this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to route this across all the belts here, and I'm going to bring this in here. So put this in here like this, and then I'm just going to copy this across multiple times. So we'll go ahead and copy this in here. I can do the same thing over there as well. 1, 2, and then for the last one, what I'm going to want as I bring this over is don't use a splitter, just connect it. So we're going to try to minimize, that way we are across the board for everyone. We're having the same kind of configuration, and everyone's in the same boat for how they're setting things up, so that everyone has like a very similar save file. So, okay, so let that go ahead and run. We're done with that. Coal's all connected. We're in a good spot. All right, so now comes the bigger challenge where we've got to do all of the stone routing. Well, it's not a big challenge. It's actually relatively straightforward. If you have direct insertion design, then you're gonna have to basically place the patches the way that I had talked about before. But in our case, we only need to very simply go and place just somewhere up here a single patch that is going to provide the stone for everything in this build. So I'm going to go ahead and place this because I know I'm at a 100% patch size, or that I'm going to be using. So default settings, I'm going to go grab a brush size of 18 and I'm going to slap this down. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into benchmark modules that you have access to in the save file, and I'm going to grab this 20 lanes at 100% patch. So this should be everything that I'm going to need, and I'm going to go ahead and just slap this down. So once this is done, you can go ahead and delete all the infinity loaders. That's just there just for demonstration purposes to show that it is truly going and creating as much as you're actually going to need. And then what I'm going to do just really simply with this is we'll just route this down. So next, we're going to have to do some kind of a turn here. So let's see what is going to be simple. Let's go this direction. Great. And then let's go and delete all this, copy this a million times over, just so that we have a full nice turn that's going across. There is no penalty if you're running this on direct, like basically belts like this. This only makes a difference, not for UPS. This makes a difference for purely just a visualization point, because the transport line length is exactly the same if you're using undergrounds or you're using basically these turbo transport belts, the normal ones. So bring that over. I'm not going to bore you with this, so I'll fast forward through me actually going and connecting all these up, but you get the idea. Everyone here has played Factorio before, so just connecting all these should be relatively straightforward to understand. Okay, so we've routed all the stone now that we need to. What I would probably say next that you would want to do, you may have some issues with like the output here, depending on how you start things up. One of the things that I like to do myself is I like to go ahead and run the purge test, which is the just basically letting everything wait until it's completely stopped. So everything in the build has stopped running. No entity is actually active. Everything has completely stopped running, and everything's at a point where we have completely stopped actually outputting anything, and we're completely, so all the entities are stopped. Then I just undo the deletion that I have, and then just wait for a second just to make sure that production is consistent. What you should probably wind up doing is just looking at the output. Just look at 10 minutes here. The target value that you're going to look for is going to be just that after 10 minutes, you should see an average creation over this 10 minutes. And this should happen hopefully pretty quickly for you if you run at 64x speed. Depending on your machine, that might be a little bit slower, a little bit faster. But the main point is, you create it, you wait until it gets to this point. And so you should see that you're at about 57,600. So that's 240 times 4 times 60, right? So as long as you're kind of at that point and you're stable for the 10-minute mark, that's enough. That's the only real test that you have to do. If you want to be a little bit more thorough, I'm going to be doing these tests, but go ahead and do the conducting of like removing materials, making sure that you still can handle the fact that you maybe like run out of copper completely here, or iron, for example, and just cut off those inputs. Watch what happens and just basically do the test that I had showed in the beginning and just connect everything back up, and then just monitor, just watch that like over the 10-minute mark again. You're at a good spot where you are constantly producing. That's going to basically guarantee that you're still going to have a very good chance of having an entry still in the competition, and that you're not going to get instantly disqualified for not being able to meet the production output demands that are here. So other than that, that's basically all that goes into it. And then just, when you save it, my ask would just be, just make the save file can be anything you want. The name is not going to matter, but just go and upload it to the channel that is also going to be in the description. It's going to be called 2025 Q1 Competition Save Files. You're going to upload the save file there. You shouldn't have an issue with it because like these save files, for example, are like 17 megs. So as long as it's not over 50 megabytes, which they hopefully are not going to be over that size. If they are, then we're going to have to figure something else out. But the save files on my Discord are limited to 50 megabytes in size, and that's just a constraint that I have because of the amount of boosts that we have. So that's it. Then you're basically at a good spot to go ahead and save this, and then when you go and submit it, just create a copy of the blueprint file. That's what you're going to create. I also have the save file on hand ready to go. And then otherwise, just remember the patch size that you used or the patch sizes that you were using so that you can very easily communicate the fact of like what your spawn settings are going to have to be in order for your build to work. And then any other notes that you want to. There's going to be a 2-week period. So we're going to have from the time of this video coming out, today is October the 5th. So in 2 weeks time on Friday, and I'll look up real quick what the date is for that. So the submissions are they're open as of effectively today, and they will close on the 17th of October. The official time stamp will be relative to your time zone and everything, and I'll have that all listed on my Discord server, so check that out for the details there. So you have until the 17th to create your design and finalize it and create the save file, and then I will start doing the actual benchmarks after that point. So thank you so much for watching, and thank you for all the people who are going to participate in the competition, and really excited to get into the complications that is Purple Science. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. Have a great day.